Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Exposed by Fate by Tessa Bailey, narrated by Elizabeth Hart. Chapter 1. New York City's most eligible bachelor was in a piss-poor mood. Not that anyone would ever guess it, from the way Oliver Preston smiled down at the dark-haired girl dancing seductively in front of him. At least, he thought she was going for seductive. She dipped down low, then rose with a twisting hip swivel, which could very well be an attempt to dislodge a wedgie. Her name had vanished along with his last 3 drinks, and it was fast approaching the point in their acquaintance when it would be rude to ask. With a discreet glance at his watch, he realized they'd been dancing and talking for an hour, although he couldn't recall a single word. Something about Gwyneth Paltrow's blog? He'd been doing this more and more lately, forgetting the social dictates that had been drilled into him his entire life, discarding names the moment they were uttered, neglecting to respond with a laugh at the appropriate moment. He'd once been the king of grinning and bullshitting. Maybe he still was, but he'd gone on autopilot. No enjoyment came from it anymore. Oliver could pinpoint the exact day it happened, when that damn magazine had determined him a catch under the headline, Manhattan's Mesmerizing Magazine Guru. The article had been the equivalent of a meal bell being rung over his unsuspecting head. Women had stopped wanting to have fun with him. They'd stopped being satisfied with a single night or even a week-long affair. Now they wanted to land him. They wanted the elegant wedding announcement in the New York Times. They wanted to weld a gold band onto his finger while cackling with merriment. They wanted to... Jesus. They wanted to introduce him to their mothers. Matrimony. If it was possible to have a phobia of saying, I do, he had a case of it. Matrimonophobia. There. He'd diagnosed himself. Not that he didn't believe in the institution of marriage. His parents had been happy enough. Some of his friends even pulled it off to varying degrees of success. The thought of doing it himself? He'd rather choose punishment in the form of a never-ending wedgie. That reminded him, what the hell was this girl's name? Jill? Whitney? Windy? Wedgie? Windy. Windy, queen of the wedgie. I'm going to hell. Windy spun in a slow circle, gyrating quite impressively, but he found himself more concerned with the disintegrating contents of his rocks glass than her impressive figure, leading him back to his earlier thoughts. Maybe the eligible bachelor announcement hadn't been where his loss of interest in the world of endless women and partying had started. Maybe it had been waning long before then, and he'd simply fallen into an inescapable pattern. Party, seduce, repeat. A certain behavior was expected of him, and he lived up to it. Had his identity become his curse? Oliver had one thing keeping him grounded: work. He'd taken the passion he usually reserved for the opposite sex and thrown it into the financial magazine his family had owned for decades. His father had built it from the ground up, but just last month, Oliver had been required to save it from bankruptcy. As a result, he now shared the helm with his sister, Caroline, producing the country's first lifestyle magazine for those with alternative lifestyles, combining finance and travel with, well, bondage techniques and gift ideas for your favorite dominant. He tossed back the remains of his drink when WW took that as a sign she should move closer, backing up until her bottom met his lap and wiggling her hips. Oliver's body responded as it always did, but there was no urgency. No driving need to get this girl alone and rip off every last piece of her clothing. He hadn't felt that in a damn long while, though, had he? His new, regrettable, marriageable status combined with the feeling he was missing something had led him here over the summer, to Serve, a BDSM club located in Manhattan's meatpacking district, owned by his formerly straight-laced sister's boyfriend, Jonah. A fact he still couldn't believe a month later. Before coming to Serve, he had already been dominant in the bedroom. hoping maybe taking it to the next level would alleviate some of the monotony he'd been experiencing. It had, briefly. After a while, that same old feeling had begun creeping in. He'd stopped enjoying himself in degrees, oftentimes coming to serve only to leave after his first drink. His conquests had all started looking and sounding the same, blurring together in a way that made him feel guilty, as if he were taking advantage in some way, saying all the right words without meaning them. Like now. Wendy threw her arms up in the air and rotated her hips in a slow circle. Her eyes held a challenge, all but shouting, "Not bad, huh?" Oliver saluted her with his empty glass. "That dress is criminal, sweetheart." Blah, blah, blah. "Maybe we need to put you in lockup." "Let's go upstairs and get this over with so I can go home and watch Survivor Man." "Thank you," Wendy purred, smoothing her hands down the front of her dress. "It's all thanks to this macrobiotic diet I've been doing. Gwyneth does it. She practically invented it. No carbs, no coffee, no alcohol." "Good God. She dances like this sober?" "Whatever you're doing." He wound her hair around his fist and pulled her up against him. "Don't stop." Wendy sucked in a breath. "Let me take a quick trip to the ladies' room, then we can go upstairs." She turned with a little shimmy, then glanced back over her shoulder. "I'm feeling bad." He winked at her. "I'll be the judge of that." As soon as she disappeared into the crowd, Oliver dropped heavily onto the nearest lounge chair, signaling the waitress for another drink. He pushed a hand through his dark mess of hair, debating whether or not to call the night off, just wait until Wendy came back and make some excuse about an early conference call. It wouldn't be a complete lie. Damn, this wasn't how he should feel when 10 minutes in the future he'd be naked with a beautiful woman. What the hell is wrong with me? Oliver pushed to his feet, intending on intercepting Wendy on the way back from the restroom. The sooner he got out of there, the better. He skirted past a young businessman running game on a waitress. A waste of time, since Jonah didn't allow employees to fraternize with clientele. At least on the downstairs lounge level. Upstairs? Different story altogether. He'd cleared half the dance floor when he saw the blonde, or rather, he saw her bare shoulders. Such an innocent body part shouldn't have arrested him so thoroughly. After all, he'd seen enough skin to rival a penthouse photographer. But something about them brought him to a standstill, even from 10 yards away. He knew the skin would be smooth, lickable. He knew she'd bunch them up to her ears when she laughed. He knew he'd find a sexy mole on the other side, just beneath her collarbone. That blonde was Eliza Ballas, his sister's old college roommate and current best friend. Oliver tried. He really, seriously tried, for all of 3 seconds, not to let his gaze dip to her ass. Not a new problem for him when it came to the sexy little Greek he'd watched come into her own over the last 7 years. No. He'd noticed Eliza the first time Carolyn brought her around. She was impossible not to notice. All long limbs, bedroom eyes, and ambition that rivaled his own. He liked her, on top of wanting to fuck her brains out. Under different circumstances, he would have tried to take her home the first time they met. He would have experienced what it felt like to have those golden legs wrapped around his waist, to watch those big brown eyes go blind. Oliver licked his upper lip when his body decided it liked that image very much, thank you. He hadn't seen Eliza in weeks, having been so busy revamping the magazine. But she'd certainly been on his mind, even more than usual. On a trip to the club last month, he'd been surprised to find Eliza at the bar, dressed to kill. Some discreet questioning of the staff he'd become friendly with had alerted him to the fact that Eliza was getting ready to embark on an evening with a British expat named Porter, also known as the man she was dancing with tonight, while looking fucking edible. Oliver had spoken to the man on a few occasions, frequenting the club as they both did. The Brit liked to dish out a little pain in the bedroom, more so than Oliver, To his credit, he never did anything a woman hadn't consented to beforehand. Still, the thought of him employing those methods on Eliza didn't sit well. Not last month, and not tonight. The Brit's hand then ghosted over Eliza's backside, propelling Oliver from his thoughts with the force of a cannon. Oh boy. He didn't like the feeling that gave him either. Kind of like a sour bomb had gone off in his stomach, turning the whiskey he drank to acid. He waited a beat, hoping it would go away. It didn't. Medic. Oliver plucked a glass of something blue off a passing tray and downed it in one gulp. Immediately his attention returned to Eliza. He'd always been able to lower the attraction to his sister's friend to a simmer. Right then, however, it felt like a roaring-ass fire. Same as it had that night last month when he'd interfered where he had no right, but had felt as though he did. As though he'd had every right to convince Serve's scheduling manager to change Eliza and Porter's appointment without alerting Eliza. It hadn't been easy. Jonah's staff did everything by the book, but Oliver had played the only trump card he'd had. If Eliza was hurt, Caroline would be upset, which would piss off the boss to an unholy degree. It had done the trick, and Oliver had rested easy that night, secure in the belief he'd done the right thing. Tonight was infinitely worse, however, because he could see Eliza focusing those doe eyes on another man. He couldn't be jealous. He'd never been jealous a day in his life. Still, it wouldn't hurt the guy to keep the grab-ass to a minimum. They were in public, for crying out loud. Never mind what he'd been up to 5 minutes ago. The image materialized of him taking the Brit's place, letting his hands roam over Eliza's hips as she rocked against him. Those pretty lips parting on a gasp. Sister's friend, asshole. Looky no touchy. Warning bells ringing in his head. Oliver started toward them. She wasn't going anywhere with that bastard. Chapter 2. Whew, yeah, he just touched my butt. Play it cool. Happens all the time. Except it didn't happen all the time. In Eliza's world, when a man touched your butt, you reported his butt to human resources. Tonight, however, she was a million miles away from New York City's cutthroat interior design world where she spent most of her waking hours. Tonight was for her. Tonight, butts would be touched. Or walloped, as the case may be. Porter, the too sexy Brit who bore a striking resemblance to mid-90s Gavin Rosedale, pulled her closer. She swayed further into his embrace without any of her usual reservations holding her back, letting herself enjoy the smell of his expensive cologne, his masculinity. She'd met Porter a month ago at Serve when her best friend Caroline convinced her to stop in for a drink. Caroline had met the love of her life that night. Eliza had made a jackass out of herself. After one dance with Porter that same evening, it had become obvious to her she was in way over her head. He spent a lot of time upstairs at Serve, where certain activities took place, so to speak. Eliza's idea of an activity was browsing swatches. Still, she'd been excited by his cool demeanor. Eager to try something new even if the world of BDSM was completely foreign to her. They hadn't even made it to the elevator when her nerves had caught up with her. And yeah, it might have had something to do with the burgeoning threesome taking place on a beautifully upholstered chaise longue adjacent to the dance floor. She'd stammered an excuse about needing to find Caroline and ran out, all the while knowing she would regret her cowardice in the morning, which she certainly had. That night had been her chance to really feel something, to experience a new world outside of her orb of spun glass. She'd come to New York for adventure, and so far, she'd only alienated herself from the rest of the population. Exactly as she'd vowed she would never do. Exactly like... Eliza shook off the dark thought. Since graduating college, she'd been busting her hump starting as an intern at the prestigious Rothman & Coward design firm before moving higher in the ranks. Now she had exclusive, influential clients who recommended her services to their friends. She had her own office, an assistant, stability, the success she'd always dreamed of. Perhaps she hadn't quite gotten to the level that would make her a partner one day, but she planned to change that. Soon. With all the success in her professional life, she should be walking on air. Instead, most mornings she woke up on her living room floor, surrounded by piles of fabric samples, with Cheez-Its stuck in her hair, wondering if achieving her goals meant being lonely. Making a trade-off. Her social calendar was sadly lacking in anything that didn't pertain to work, or the new HGTV fall lineup. Eliza needed an outlet. She desperately wanted to feel sexy, desirable. Porter had made her feel that way in spades that first night. Hell, he'd looked at her like she was cherry pie fresh from the oven. She'd come back to serve after having completed the required paperwork and interview process, only to be stood up by Porter her first time as an official member of the club. Her subsequent humiliation had led to a night of complete and utter intoxication to compensate, courtesy of the club's creative martini menu. Not tonight. Tonight, she'd shed her insecurities and come here for an experience. Had it been fate that the first man she'd run into was Porter? She chose to think so, and nothing, not even two walruses flogging each other while singing the national anthem, would send her packing. The thought of Porter doing the things to her that she'd read about recently made her feel flushed from head to toe. His hand had moved from her bottom to coast up the small of her back, but she could still feel his touch there.
Ready to go upstairs?
Oh, Lord. That accent. Eliza nodded once. Let's go. Porter twined their fingers together.
No standing me up this time.
Me? Stand you up? When Porter only nodded once, Eliza frowned, ready to point out that he'd been the one to ditch her, when a familiar voice interrupted from behind.
Eliza, the Sunny Bunny Ballas. Is that you?
Oliver? Without another thought, she immediately disengaged her hand from Porter's, letting it drop. She wanted to kick herself afterwards, but it had been knee-jerk. Not because she felt guilty. Certainly not. But she'd only just gotten comfortable sleeping outside her comfort zone. Someone from her normal, everyday life witnessing that zone jumping meant sheets of a different thread count. Oliver knew her only as his sister's studious friend, in her minuscule black dress and red pumps that matched her lipstick. She looked anything but studious. Slowly, she turned to face Oliver. As it always did when she ran into Caroline's brother, her stomach flipped a little. Nothing behind it, just pure female appreciation. Helen Keller herself would have had the same reaction. She knew through Caroline that her brother spent every morning in the gym, hungover or not. That dedication had done him, and every female in the vicinity, a major service. Well-honed muscles drew the eye as they shifted under his shirt, within tailored sleeves. Careless bedhead brought to mind an image of him stumbling out of a hotel room, 4 shades of lipstick on his collar. In fact, she would lay odds that very scenario had taken place more than once. His smile alone radiated such sensual confidence, it had to be illegal in most states, and yet it didn't even compare to the look. Oliver Preston looked at women as though he were already inside them. So yeah, it tended to throw a girl off her game. Unless, of course, you were Eliza and you'd known him for 7 years, seen him go through upwards of 100 short-term relationships and countless one-night stands. Then you would know he looked at every woman the same way, and it meant nothing. Nothing. It was just Oliver being Oliver. Women loved him. Men wanted the name of his personal trainer. He was friends with everyone and committed to no one. If there was an unusually hard glint in his eye when he nodded at Porter, surely she was imagining it.
Thought it was you. Looking good, babe.
He came forward and pulled her into a crushing hug. She couldn't help but compare his scent to Porter's, clean and familiar instead of darkly mysterious. Over his shoulder, she met Porter's eyes with the silent apology. Oliver, we were just...
Heading upstairs.
Porter interjected firmly, making Eliza's neck heat.
Yes,
Oliver laid a hand on his chest, looking confused.
But I'm here now.
Eliza couldn't stop the laugh that escaped. If Oliver arrives unexpectedly, all plans are subject to change? He winked at her.
Quick as always, aren't you?
She shook her head, silently cursing the stupid flip-flop in her belly. How long would she need to know this man before her body stopped counteracting her brain around him? Listen, she leaned in and said for Oliver's ears alone. You're cramping my style, playboy. Scram.
Sorry, can't do it.
He frowned.
And ouch.
What do you mean, can't do it? He avoided her gaze.
Is this the first time you've been out with this guy?
Yes and no. It's the first time we... Blue eyes snapped to hers.
Have gone upstairs?
Eliza said nothing. Oliver cleared his throat.
Make an excuse and I'll take you home. He's not what you want. This isn't what you want.
She felt a punch of irritation. I'd like to find that out for myself, thank you. Porter moved closer and slid an arm around her waist.
Is there a problem?
No. Oliver's attention was focused on Porter's arm, brow quirked.
Yes,
he said slowly, with just a hint of surprise.
It would seem so. Care to share?
Porter asked, a hard edge to his tone. For a moment, Oliver looked to be debating with himself. Finally, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes as usual.
I'd like a word alone with Eliza. Would you mind?
Porter hesitated a moment before leaning down to whisper in her ear.
I'll be at the bar. Come get me when you're done.
His lips brushed her ear, and although Eliza couldn't see him, she got the feeling his gaze was on Oliver.
I hope you don't keep me waiting too long. I'm eager to get you alone.
Whoa. Were these two gorgeous men sort of, fighting over her? She wouldn't lie. Something about that possibility turned her on in a big way. She'd wanted to be desired, and in the blink of an eye, she felt like the only woman in the room. Oliver's jaw remained tight until Porter released her and stepped back.
Would you happen to have a business card handy?
Porter inclined his head and withdrew one from inside the pocket of his button-down shirt.
Why? You in the market for mid-19th century antiques? God, no.
Oliver pocketed the card.
Just putting a name to a face.
They eyed each other for a moment before Porter turned and disappeared into the crowd. Eliza punched Oliver in the shoulder. What the hell was that? I can't believe you, of all people, just cock-blocked me. His burst of laughter turned heads.
Easy, Bunny. I'm doing you a favor.
She blew a breath toward the ceiling. Why do you insist on calling me Bunny? He bent down and pressed their foreheads together.
Your nose twitches when you get angry.
It does not.
Don't worry. It's adorable, just like the rest of you.
Eliza grumbled in her throat. Don't be endearing right now.
I can't find the off switch.
Dimples appeared on either cheek.
Care to perform a search?
Oh, boy. She'd never been required to withstand this much Oliver charm before. Come to think of it, they'd never actually been alone together. Caroline was always there, being the reason they were in the same place at the same time. His mouth had never been this close to hers, his voice rumbling for her ears alone, mere inches separating their bodies. She'd already been aroused from dancing with Porter, and now the heavy feeling below her waist only increased with Oliver's proximity. She kept waiting for him to step back, put some platonic distance between them. But he didn't. Just continued watching her in that babe I'm inside you already way that made the flesh between her thighs throb. Looked like it would be up to her to put the brakes on. Eliza placed a hand on his chest and pushed him away. What did you want to talk to me about? His smile faded in degrees.
What did you come here for tonight?
Same thing as you.
And that is?
When she didn't immediately answer, he shook his head.
If you don't know, you're not ready.
Anger built inside Eliza's chest when his words dismantled her pride. Against her will, a small part of her recognized he might even be right, but the concession did nothing to ease her annoyance. She didn't like Oliver looking at her with sympathy, when a moment ago she'd finally felt sexy. How dare he take that feeling away from her, along with her newfound courage? He could sleep his way through the female population of Manhattan, but she couldn't have one single experience of her own? That final thought gave her an idea. A terrible one. Even recognizing that only bad things could come from decisions made while pissed off and mildly intoxicated, she still let it percolate. Oliver knew this world. He was part of it. But none of his conquests ever amounted to anything. His resistance to commitment saw to that. She needed to know what she'd be getting into if she and Porter ever made it up the damn stairs again. She wanted to be prepared. What if... Teach me. Oliver had just taken a sip of his fresh drink. He choked on it now.
What?
She raised her chin. If you think I'm not ready, show me. Then I will be. You know, teach a man to fish.
Bible parables have no place in this discussion.
Fair enough. She leaned in and took a sip of his drink, gaining courage by the way his eyes darkened when she licked the remaining moisture from her upper lip. Come on, Playboy. We're both adults. I need the experience, and you have enough to fill an encyclopedia. She thought he flinched, but decided it must have been her imagination. You don't have to worry about me getting attached because, well, I know you, and I get the knowledge I need to seduce Porter. It's totally normal.
Eliza, you're smoking crack.
She smirked to let him know she'd been joking. Sort of. The only crack I see is the one in your resolve. You've never turned down casual sex. Are you really going to start now? He scratched the back of his neck.
You're not my type.
My turn to say ouch.
You misunderstand. Not being my type is a good thing. You're a good thing.
Too good for you? Oliver slowly nodded. Wow. He really was turning her down. She felt a wave of disappointment, along with another blow to her pride, but convinced herself his disinterest was for the best. What had possessed her? When he'd called her too good, he'd meant too green. Not sophisticated or experienced enough for his tastes. She couldn't come up with another explanation for his reasoning. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Forcing herself to smile, Eliza stepped back, intending to retrieve her purse from the high, round table she'd been sitting at with Porter. Never mind. I don't know why I...
Wait.
Chapter 3.
Don't do it, man. Oh, but I really fucking want to.
Deciding to listen to the second voice, just for the moment, Oliver backed Eliza up enough that her sleek backside was wedged against the high stool beside the table. He bit back a groan when his heavy erection encountered her trim belly, her breasts pressing into his chest to swell over the top of her neckline. This shouldn't be happening. He shouldn't finally be crazy as hell to get inside a girl only to have it be his sister's best friend. If they were one floor higher, he'd already be slipping her panties down her legs with one hand, unzipping his jeans with the other. His commitment-free lifestyle worked so well because he never got too personal with a woman. Sleeping with Eliza would get personal, whether she believed it would or not. He didn't get to walk away from her, assuring himself they might never cross paths again. They would, early and often, especially if she decided she liked what he taught her and decided to become a regular at Serve. Oh, God. He was actually thinking about this little arrangement as if it might happen. The very idea of being her instructor, rewarding her and punishing her according to his own rules, Made him so hot he wasn't.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?